Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and thank you again for taking the time to join us for today's next installment of H&A webinar series, Cost Savings from the Corporate Real Estate Team. Just a couple items, quick items of housekeeping before we get started. As you notice, microphones are muted upon entry. That way we can cut out any unnecessary sounds during the presentation. We'll also, though, however, set up for an interactive question and answer. As you may have received the chat message through the chat feature of WebEx platform, we can utilize that as the option for the Q&A. So please, if you do have any questions during the presentation or when we go to the interactive session following, please utilize that. You can direct them directly to me, David Hickey, as the host, or to the entire audience. Also, if you are unable to stay with us the entire time, or you know a colleague wasn't able to join, or simply want to get another look, we will be recording today's presentation. It will be available online. My contact information will be on at the end of the presentation. You can also visit our website at www.hickeyanassociates.com. All right, thank you. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Just a brief background on who we are. We are celebrating our 30th year as one of the first companies to offer integrated site location and workforce services. Today, as the global leader in the industry, we have active projects around the world utilizing our more than 60 professionals with additional subject matter experts in key global markets. You see a number of our offices on the screen there. We are very proud of a number of the awards and recognitions that we've received in recent years, whether it's been a source for incentive data information from a magazine site selection, or actually having our data licensed from the Thomson Reuters, but also relationships, organizations that we're part of, Cornet Global, the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors, SIOR, as well as IPT, the Institute for Professionals in Taxation. We have a number of offices, 14 across the United States. I am doing the presentation today from our New York City office. And what we do is we have these national, a number of offices across the nation. But really, they're truly a local approach, but allowing for those national services. What are the offerings? What services do we provide? Well, a number of these we'll touch on today and talk about where these different factors come in. And some corporations do this in-house, some do it out, some consult, or some are building these capabilities. But really, what we look at is an all-around international global approach to site selection and location advisory, a comprehensive tax incentives service, which is everything from identification through the compliance, as well as the negotiation, capture, securing. And those include complex incentives as well in the U.S., new market tax credit, historical tax credits, but then some of the other more dynamic, whether it could be a patent box, pioneer tax, and so forth. I mentioned already the compliance. Also, labor analytics, we'll cover more in a few moments, supply chain and logistics, and really truly, as the companies are today, and looking at their overall footprint around the world, is having that global expertise and experience in a number of different markets in every corner of the world. So what is that? The strategic value proposition that comes from the corporate real estate office and corporate real estate savings can ultimately drive those cost savings and operational efficiencies as well. What we're going to touch on today are location strategies, how that can affect some of the incentives of public-private partnerships that are available, and part of that are training cost reimbursements, real true savings when it comes to a project or the overall bottom line. Labor analytics, understanding what the workforce dynamics are, costs, skill sets, competition, attrition, items such as that are critical to any business success, and then as well as logistics and supply chain to make sure that your company can get the goods to the clients, to the customers, as well as the resources that you need to develop that. So to begin, we will start with site location strategies. Now, overall, much of what we do does encompass under the strategic value proposition of location strategies. And most of the times, these are decision-based cost savings. So these are driven on the thought of premeditated, to say the least, in the opportunity to find these savings and to discover them. Typical savings we capture and we find with our clients is somewhere between 20 to 30%. And really, the top reward, which is can be significant savings, and one that you're seeing more and more of the C-suite realizing, is the discounted real estate being that top capture, but also deep savings in logistics, utility expenses can be very significant, as well as labor costs. And we'll actually look at a scenario just a few moments about how those labor costs come into play. What are some of those top-level issues that come into play when we're looking at site selection strategies? The pre-move capital, how can you get money in as well as get money out, and then move it within infrastructure. And this can be anything from, depending on the type of company or the type of industry that the project is dealing with, and what is the infrastructure. Is it everything from an international airport, or is it a seaport? Is it a deep seaport? Is it freight? What is that infrastructure in play? Is it a call center, a data center? We might need higher broadband and more reliable electricity. Sustainable labor, making sure that labor force is in place in what you need. And not only is it here today, but also tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years out from now. Inventory of usable real estate, you hear the term very often of shovel ready. Is that property, is there not only a greenfield, but as well as facilities that can fit your project needs? And then as well as incentives. We never advise our clients that they should go to a particular location based on the incentives, based on those funds that are available. However, it is still a key part of any decision-making process when doing site location study and analysis. Now, what is the overall methodology? What is the process that many companies take on when you're doing a real sophisticated corporate real estate function? Well, the first step is always the planning and understanding what is that key criteria for you. What are those most important aspects for the company for that project? What is the timeline? What is the weighting of those aspects, and building that out? The next is doing a macro site analysis. A lot of what I look at this is not just proving out those locations that will work the best, but eliminating those that will not. Being able to go through. Sometimes it could be 100 sites that we look at through this process, and understanding a lot of those high-level factors, really focusing on those 5 that we just covered, and being able to understand some of those inputs and the data captured there. Once understood, and once those numbers are put forth and realized, we can then narrow it down to the micro level. And this is where we're down selecting. We're looking at perhaps 3 to 5 sites, doing the final due diligence, really looking on the ground at what are the true facts that are in play. How does that affect the project? What is the forecast for those impacts as well? And as part of this is the next phase, and those are site visits, getting on the ground, meeting fellow employers, meeting the economic development organization, even perhaps meeting potential employees, meeting with community leaders, touring the site, seeing it firsthand. And then also, when it comes to incentives and some of the public-private partnerships, is understanding and seeing those relationships firsthand with the community, and what kind of support you'll see there. This is a commitment not just for the short term, but hopefully for the long term as well. So to be sure that support will be. Once it's been narrowed down to the final couple sites, then the final negotiation comes into play. And so really understanding, doing the due diligence, understanding incentives, we'll cover more of that in a few minutes. Understanding the labor analytics, we'll go into more detail on. But really doing that negotiation, part of that is, of course, on the incentives as well, and narrowing down until the client is ultimately comfortable with that final decision, with that location, and then the capture of those incentives. Now, we talk about savings. Where are these cost savings? Now, these are relative numbers. These are examples that we find often. But let's just talk through a couple of these and what we mean. Now, on the planning side, we say about 12%, the overall average of hundreds of projects. Now, why we see the savings in the planning is because instead of going into the projects, or while the project is going on and developing the strategy, before we even get into that, we identify what are those factors that are most important. What are those costs that are there, that are present, that perhaps could be reduced through the proper real estate due diligence, through labor analytics, through incentives. And really by identifying those, we can immediately understand where we should look for cost savings and begin to identify. At that macro level, we're eliminating all those where we know we won't have costs. Now, while these savings are there, we're getting rid of those. Then further on the micro, we can narrow it down even more into those savings opportunities. And then when we talk about that final negotiation, this is getting into the incentives. 10 to 12%, I think in most cases is actually a pretty low number. Fortunately, on the global side, there are more controls, we'll say limits, on where some of these incentives, for example, can be put into play. But altogether, when factored in all, we're looking at about 20 to 30% that can be driven from the right sophisticated corporate real estate approach. Now, we more and more, as defining, is employing forced statistical analyses and looking at the factors. You see on the left an example of a microsite location. So you see there are hundreds and hundreds of data points and really thousands of many that we do. And this is the grading ranking type of material. So this is for the final 5 sites that we're looking at, or sorry, final 6 sites. We're looking at through all those different factors. There's about 15 different factors that we focus in on, and then some factors within there. And being able to not only capture and understand all that data, but also be able to present that back to the client to be able to understand and explain that back to their team. Also, more utilization of GIS. You'll see a few more of these of heat maps and high-level statistical visuals throughout this presentation, and that's more and more becoming a key factor and something that we have invested quite a bit in and want to encourage and show our clients to be able to not only see all these numbers and hear the narrative, but also visually be able to put these onto a map and understand. So doing an in-depth site location analysis, what is the desired outcome? Well, really eliminating subjectivity so that the favored location is proven as the best location based on the empirical evidence the analysis is included, and the data results indicate or meets that key criteria. So oftentimes that key criteria is lowest cost with the highest impact. Also, the ultimate goal now as well, and this continues to evolve, is that the entire client team is engaged, agrees upon it, and ultimately agrees upon the results. So this could be everyone with the very top executive level into HR, real estate, production, procurement, education, finance, tax, human capital, logistics, supply chain, whatever it might be, whoever is engaged is fully understood and agrees upon the terms as multiple business units now come in line in this very critical real estate decision. And then ultimately that site decision is based on sound data, financial, operational, and really utilizing the analysis and the information that has been pulled, not simply breaking down barriers in certain aspects and certain previous thought. Now, another one of the key items I mentioned is on public incentives, which is a part of the overall location analysis. Now, when is the right time for public financial incentives to be pursued when making a real estate decision? Well, as you can see on the map, on the image here in this chart, all the time. The way to look at it is incentives can be pursued. Whether in many of the times when we commonly think, if it's a greenfield, if it's a new startup, if you're in a growth or expansion phase, those are certainly times to pursue incentives. That's where you're going to find really the best bang for the buck and the most interest from the communities, from government agencies to support the financial means. But we're also, whether it's a maturity, whether it's a retention cycle, we'll talk about more of these triggers in the next moment, but even on the close or a reuse type of situation. A community, a government agency does not want to have empty facilities within their borders. Therefore, we may be able to find support as well. If that real estate decision is that we're going to close, we're going to relocate, it is worth having that discussion with the community to see if there's a way that you could work together to create a reuse, whether it's a direct sale or reuse of that property, maybe even some sort of scenario where the community gets directly involved. How do these incentives work? Well, typically the incentives come in one of two ways, either in reduced tax liability or direct cash. There are also other real savings that can be discovered through what we call a lower cost of money. So through different mechanisms, loan guarantees, as well as other free trade zone type of opportunities, free zones, and other tax holidays. Really what its impact will reduce capital outlays in the long term, extra resources to invest back into the business. Many projects now we're finding are on a phased approach. And so this can allow more confidence in getting to that next phase versus just that initial investment. And overall, an enhanced return, higher ROI, which of course is important to anyone's bottom line. The initial startup costs of a lot of these operations can be reduced significantly through incentives. And then also, if there is a downsizing or even just a straight retention situation, can, as we say, reduce the cost and the emotions of those type of situations. Now, what are a lot of those triggers? Some of those great examples. Well, in the overall real estate facility strategy, whether it's consolidation, relocation, expansion, all of those can be additional triggers. Job retention, as mentioned. Many people don't look at this. Well, we talk to our clients when they're in, especially in a lease expiration situation, where there is going to be retention. That is a potential strategy that can trigger incentives, trigger direct cost savings, and upgrade to a facility. Whether this is, we'll talk on all the way on the right, let's see energy efficiency. If there are upgrades that a company is committing to at a facility, whether that be lights in an office, energy efficiency equipment in a manufacturing facility, whatever that might be, there are incentives, there are rebates, there's support, there's upfront reimbursements that could be in play to help reduce those costs. Also, if there's any production output improvements, if you're improving your overall line, whether in most of the time that would typically bring in on an energy efficiency side, sustainability, if you are making those investments, it's key to look at incentives to see if there are ways to reduce the costs in the immediate, but also in the long term. Also, as I mentioned, the leasing strategies, extensions, renewals are great triggers. They could even trigger what we call as of right benefits, where if you are set to keep a certain amount of meet a minimum threshold of jobs, you're seeing this more and more in the United States. Say if you retain 50 jobs at a certain wage level and you commit to a capital investment and a lease renewal, you get an as of right, you get an incentive. There's no discretionary, there's no extensive approval process. Those are just in place. It's important to understand and identify these when looking at your real estate strategy and your facility strategy going forward. What types of incentive funds are out there? Well, there's a number of different cash benefits. These could be a cash grant directly upfront, as well as what we call post-performance. So as you prove out, as you create jobs, as you make investment, cash grants could be available. Forgivable loans, which can in a sense be similar to cash, in the sense that you receive a low-interest loan financing from a community government entity, and if you meet certain goals, certain milestones, they'll perhaps forgive a significant portion. The state of Connecticut here in the U.S. offers a program like that that could be as high as $50,000 per new job is created. Also, certain tax credits can be converted to cash, so that if you do not have, company does not have a certain income tax liability in that state, it could be transferred back to cash. Not usually on a one-to-one basis, but can be negotiated very close. On the tax side is really reducing that overall tax liability going forward. It'll be on the property and real personal, sales and use, VAT type taxes, corporate income, it's a franchise or premium in certain parts of the world and states in the U.S., as well as impact fees. One of the largest and often overlooked is regarding training grants. And these are direct reimbursements of eligible training expenses, costs that are going to happen in your business, and most of the time happen anyway. And these reimbursements could go direct to trainee wages, trainer wages, developing a curriculum, and the utilization of equipment, training space, and supplies. Also assistance, and sometimes not easily as quantifiable, but are ultimately savings for the business, is recruiting as well, particularly if you're entering a new community, helping with recruitment advertising, job fairs, even application intake and pre-screening, as well as coordination with the efforts to tax credits and training. Additional programs, some more complex than others, but could be reduced or even free land from the community, reduce utility costs. We always bring in the utility into the discussions as that is a significant cost of the business, and they have an incentive to reduce your business entering into their and into their community. On the job training, the wave and expedition of permitting process and permitting costs, as well as other special opportunities, we call them, and typically those are zones. That could be everything from a free zone in the UAE to an enterprise zone in Colorado. But these are, if you invest in that certain location and meet minimum thresholds, then you'll receive cash grants, tax credits, and other potential incentives as well. How does the corporate real estate team deal with these incentives? Well, typically in H&A, we work it over kind of 5 steps of the way. First is the pre-qualification of incentives. That's understanding, identifying what is available, what is the risk, what is the reward for those. Again, going back to the comment on an income tax liability. State of Kansas will come and say, they may have $30 million for you through the PEAK program, but you need to ensure that you have $30 worth of tax liability over that term in order to even capture that incentive. So making sure there's what is in place. Also, what are those risks? Certain programs, certain countries, and states will have significant callbacks and, in fact, fines on top of that if you don't meet incentive milestones. Therefore, it's important to understand and identify all those in advance. Also, protecting public disclosure and making sure that in no sense until the absolutely needed release of that company's name or the project information. As part of the negotiation, really the back and forth, the securing of the incentives through discussion along the state and representing the client in those discussions. Legal construction is the paperwork. There is, and anytime you work with government, there is paperwork that needs to be done. That is much in the role of the corporate real estate function, through whether it's internal or external, someone like Kiki Associates. And then finally, what has become one of the most important aspects of this is the aftercare and benefit collection, which really is the compliance of these incentives on the corporate side. Just because you sign or you agree to it doesn't mean you're going to capture it. Ultimately, you need to file paperwork, you need to report along the way in order to prove out and to receive those checks or those credits from the government. The Kiki Associates will completely support run that part of the business. What are the steps of the